Hi everybody, in today's video we're going to talk about the ISTQB CTFL certification. And I'm going to give you everything that you need to know to understand the certification and to ultimately pass it. And with that, let's get started. TQB certification is the foundation of the ISTQB exam. So in order to get additional certifications, you have to have the underlying understanding, and you basically can't skip it, especially if you're going to get additional certifications, and certainly I recommend that. ISTQB certification, as we all know, is the most popular testing certification available. And the CTFL certification is the required prerequisite for every other certification path, whether it's advanced, agile, or the most recently AI certifications. In addition to that, over 1 million people are certified with the ISTQB standard. No other certifications have any more people registered or currently certified. And the good thing about the CTFL is that once you've passed it once, you don't have to renew it, and you get to keep it for life. The certification is a good idea for the following reasons. So if you're a new and aspiring tester, it is certainly makes a lot of advantage to go ahead and get that certification in order to understand basically information related to fundamentals in testing. So we're basically taking the certification to all speak the common language. If other people outside the organization want to understand more about testing, then they could also do that. So if you're a developer, for example, and developers do a lot of testing, so especially unit test. So it makes a lot of sense for a developer to at least get the CTFL foundation in order to be able to kind of speak the same language in the vocabulary. In addition to that, there are BAs, for example, and product owners that do things like create test cases and create test plans. So it makes a lot of sense for them also to consider getting the CTFL. In addition to that, if a project manager or even some of the QA managers, which I am, I certainly wanted to understand the foundation and the basics and improve my knowledge and experience as a tester. So I also went and got the CTFL certification. Now, the CTFL exam is a closed book exam, so you can't have any notes or any devices. There is one answer to each question. It's multiple choice, and you have about 90 seconds each to read, understand, and respond to the question. So the good thing about the CTFL is there's no additional prerequisites. This is the foundation. And as I mentioned before, this is valid for life. You don't need to recertify. Once you've got it, you've done. And the current certification is on the version 4. So if you're testing for the certification, make sure that you're following the right version. It has 6 chapters and 64 learning objectives. Now, in order to pass the exam, you need to get 26 out of 40 questions right. So that's roughly a 65% pass rate. And you have 60 minutes to complete it. Each question is a multiple choice question, and each question has a 1-point scale of rating. Now, it's important to really understand, and these are some of the tips and tricks that I'm going to give you in order to pass this exam. So, roughly half of the exam is in the following chapters of 4 and 5. So make sure that you really spend the bulk of your time studying in chapters 4 and 5, because they have exactly half of the points and the questions come from that. So don't get lazy, don't get complacent. Make sure you're really focusing on chapters 4 and 5. And if you do that, then you're going to do well. Now, here's more details around the different chapters involved. So the first one is going to be the fundamentals of testing. That includes principles, test process, error versus defect as a few examples. Then you move into chapter 2, which is testing throughout the SDLC. So testing levels, test types, and DevOps activities. Chapter 3 is static testing, reviews and static analysis. Chapter 4, again, critical chapter, test analysis and design. So this is around test design techniques. It is roughly 11 points. And then chapter 5 is managing the test activities. So risk, planning, defect management. That is 9 points. So you can roughly see that half of your exam is from 4 and 5. And then testing tools is 2 points. So it talks about automation, benefits, and risk. Now let's focus additional information and insight into both chapters 4 and 5. And as someone who has taken the test, I can tell you that these areas, especially chapter 4, equivalence partitioning, boundary value analysis, decision table testing, state transition testing, statement and branch coverage, and experience-based techniques. These are difficult concepts as it relates to software testing. So it's not things that you're going to do every day, but it's things that you need to understand in order to pass this test. And so I would say this is the most important chapter because it's got 11 points in it. So you definitely want to spend a lot of time in chapter 4. And then followed closely by chapter 5, risk-based testing, which is really practical because a lot of your testing is going to be risk-based. So it's important to understand that concept. In addition to that, your test planning and test estimation, I really recommend people to spend a lot of time and effort in test planning to understand those principles and practices. In addition to that, you'll have test monitoring, configuration management, defect management, and roles in the testing team. So make sure that you're understanding each one of these components and aspects in order for you to do well and pass the test. Now, roughly about 1 in 4 people fail the exam. It's about 75%, which is really pretty good. And so I'm going to continue to give you information that you need in order to be able to pass this exam. Now, I believe that these reasons are fully avoidable, right? So here's some additional tips and tricks in order to do well. First, you need to come up with a plan. How are you going to study it, right? And so it's important to study the syllabus. The syllabus is free. There's no additional charge to get that or download it. Make sure that you're really understanding the syllabus because every question comes from the syllabus. And this is your single source of truth. I would say spend roughly half of your time reviewing and reading the syllabus. As we just talked about, chapters 4 and 5 are half the points. So spend at least half your time there, right? And make sure you understand those techniques that we just covered in detail. Another good point is you need to make sure that you can get copies of sample exams and be able to take them. Remember, it's a timed test, so you have about 90 seconds to answer each question. So what I do is I take the question, I read it twice to make sure that I understand it before I do anything else. And then once I do that, then I proceed to rationalizing in my head and coming up with the best answer. Now, I will tell you probably if there's 4 A, B, C, D, for example, there's probably going to be two answers that are pretty close, right? But there's going to be a best answer and a good answer, for example. So make sure that you're picking the best example. Now, it's also important to understand that when you're doing the test, in general, you want to hit about a 75% pass rate. So what I did and what I recommend is that you get at least 4 to 5 practice exams. And if you look at these questions and you understand the sample exams, then you're going to know what types of questions you're going to get. And you're going to probably see some of those questions on the actual exam. So the more that you practice with the sample exams, the better that you're going to do. In addition to that, make sure that you really understand the glossary and the terms in the glossary, because it's all important that we all make sure we're talking the same language. But in order to get the answers to the questions right, you need to understand the terms. You don't want to not focus on the glossary because you're going to leave some easy points on the table. Now, I think a good rule of thumb is probably 20 to 30 hours in order to prep for the exam. Now, I would say if you have more experience in testing, then you can probably do it in about 20 hours of really focused time. If you have less experience or if you're a newer tester, you probably want to spend 30 to 40 hours of exam prep for the test. So really, these are the keys to passing your test at the first go-around. And I think if you realistically do these things and take the advice that I'm providing, then you're going to have no issues in passing it the first time. Now, here are further some mistakes that make people fail. For example, you've gone through the syllabus, you hit chapter 4, you spent a lot of time and effort in 4, and you get to 5 and you feel like, yeah, I've got through the hard part. I can just basically skim 5, not worry about it. However, if you do that, then you're going to fail the test because you're not properly prepared. In addition to that, you want to be able to focus not just on memorization, but also on applying it, right? You want to be able to take the technique, understand it, and then apply it. In addition to this, here's another critical area where people fail. You're going to see words like best, more appropriate, least, and accept. So make sure that you understand these verbs and qualifiers in order to get the question and really understand the question right. And finally, if you don't practice within the time constraints, then this is going to cost you to miss questions because you don't have enough time. Remember, about 90 seconds to answer a question. So you want to make sure that you get through all the questions. Now, you're going to go through and you're going to get through some questions, right? But if you don't understand a question, you can skip that question and then think about it, maybe come back to it as an example. So make sure, though, that you're spending time and you're doing a lot of practice training as it relates to taking the test. And most importantly, keep an eye on the clock because that does matter. Now, the cost of the test is in the US, it's roughly $200 to $250. It's far less than what people think. And what I recommend, when I got the certification, I just paid for it because I felt like it was worth the investment in order to get the test and kind of do it right. That's definitely what I did. Now, in terms of booking, if you're in the US, you need to go through ISTQB. There's some other places, if you're not in the US, BCS, ISQL, and Pearson. I think I took mine through Pearson, and it was fairly easy to do from that perspective. Now, the nice thing about now is that you can also take it proctored from home. So that was a thing that I didn't have in the past. I definitely went to a center, but now you can take it at home. So it's a lot more convenient. Now, make sure that you're reading the fine print, you're selecting the right syllabus in order to prepare for the test and for that material. Now, the thing that I like about the certifications is certainly worth it. You're going to hear a lot of people that tell you it's not worth it, it's a waste of time, etc. But I really believe, as a hiring manager and someone who has taken the exam, that it is certainly worth it. It is relatively cheap compared to other certifications. You have the certification for a lifetime. And once you have the CTFL, it basically tells employers that you understand testing techniques, you know the vocabulary. So none of that really has to be trained from that perspective. It also gets you past the screening process. And as today, with these ATS systems, it is more important than ever to get your resume not only in front of the HR person, but the hiring person. So if you have that ISTQB CTFL certification listed on your resume, it is going to help get you inside the door and to at least get you in front of the right person to have the right conversation about the job. Now, a lot of people as well do very well on exams, right? They take it, they understand it, they can pass it. Now, it doesn't mean that you taking the exam and passing it and having that ability is going to make you a great tester. While it's going to certainly help to make you understand these principles and techniques, it's not going to make you a great tester. And I've said for many years that either you're a great tester or you're not a great tester. There's really nothing in between, right? Because testing requires a lot of analytical thinking and decision making and analysis. And it's really important that you have that understanding in order to be a great tester. While the certification helps, it helps to get your resume in front of the right people. It's up to you to kind of take it a step further and to get a job if that's what you're looking to do and accomplish from that perspective. So the bottom line is you take this certification. This is the foundation. This is the step that every person who's in testing that gets certified takes. So you're not alone. Over 1 million people have gotten the ISTQB certification. So I recommend you study the syllabus. You understand what's going on with terms. You really focus energy and effort on chapters 4 and 5. You take the sample exams several times. Make sure you're timing it. And then once you do that and apply it to real world examples with testing techniques, then, you're on the winning team, right? But this is the foundation. This is the first move. And I know if you apply yourself, you take what I've provided and the information in this video, you certainly are going to pass it. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So I also want to give you a little bit of additional information on the QA Revolution YouTube channel. So I talk about a lot of different things on my channel. I really cover a lot around software testing fundamentals, test techniques, automation, real QA strategy. In addition to that, as you see, I'm talking about certifications. I'm giving you information about interviews, techniques on getting hired. Since I'm a hiring manager, I can provide that insight and expertise so that you can know and understand. In addition to that, I'm spending a lot of time in AI, and I've got a lot of practical videos on Claude and different techniques, different AI tools. In addition to that, I do some level of tool breakdowns on the tools that I recommend, the tools that I don't. So I hope that this information has been helpful. I really firmly believe that the ISTQB CTFL certification is a must-have for any tester, and I'm going to be publishing additional certification videos. So please come back and review those, and I look forward to seeing you in the next videos. Thank you. Bye.